The morning sun rose slowly over the small human colony on New Sol planet. The air smelled like fresh flowers and wet earth after the night rain. 3 young boys ran through the green fields, laughing and playing games. Their names were Taiho, Jinwoo, and Hyunki, and they were the best of friends. Taiho was 17 years old with dark hair and bright eyes that always looked curious about everything around him. He loved to explore new places and find interesting things that others had missed. His family grew vegetables in the colony fields, and he helped them every day after school finished. Jinwoo was also 17, and he was the smartest boy in their small school. He could fix broken machines and understand how complicated things worked. His father was a mechanic who repaired the farming equipment that kept their colony running smoothly. Jinwoo dreamed of becoming an engineer and building spaceships that could travel to distant stars. Hyunki was the youngest at 16, but he was the strongest of the 3 friends. He helped his mother at the colony medical center where she treated sick people and animals. Hyunki wanted to become a doctor like his mother and help people feel better when they were hurt or scared. New Sol was a peaceful planet, far from the busy center of the galaxy. The human colonists had built their homes near a beautiful river that provided fresh water for drinking and growing crops. Children played safely in the streets while their parents worked in the fields and workshops. Everyone knew each other and helped when someone needed assistance. The planet was part of the Galactic Federation, which was a big government that controlled many worlds across the stars. The Federation had many different alien species as members, but humans were considered one of the weakest and least important groups. Most aliens thought humans were too emotional and not very smart compared to other species. The 3 friends often went exploring in the old mining tunnels that were located outside their village. These tunnels had been dug many years ago by the first human settlers who were looking for valuable metals and crystals. Now the tunnels were empty and abandoned, but they made perfect places for young boys to have adventures. One sunny afternoon, Taiho, Jinwoo, and Hyunki decided to explore a tunnel they had never been inside before. This tunnel was deeper and darker than the others, and they needed flashlights to see where they were walking. The walls were covered with strange symbols that none of them could read. Deep inside the tunnel, they found something very unusual. There were pieces of metal scattered on the ground that looked different from anything they had seen before. The metal was silver and blue, and it seemed to glow with its own light. The pieces had strange shapes, and some of them had buttons and wires attached. Jinwoo examined the metal pieces carefully with his flashlight. He thought they looked like parts from some kind of spaceship, but he had never seen technology like this before. The metal was very light, but felt extremely strong when he tried to bend it. There were symbols carved into some pieces that looked similar to the ones on the tunnel walls. The boys decided to collect some of the smaller pieces to take back to the village. They thought maybe the pieces were valuable and could be traded for supplies that their families needed. They filled their backpacks with the most interesting-looking parts and marked the location on Taho's hand-drawn map so they could return later. When they returned to the village that evening, the boys showed the metal pieces to their parents. Adults were amazed by the strange technology and agreed that the pieces might be worth something to traders who visited their planet. Everyone was excited about the possibility that the boys had found something that could help improve life in their small colony. What none of them knew was that the metal pieces came from a crashed alien military spaceship. The ship had belonged to a fierce warrior race called the Vorak, who were known throughout the galaxy for their pride and violent temper. The Vorak had been searching for their missing ship for several weeks, and they were growing more angry each day. The Galactic Federation had sent a patrol ship to investigate reports of the missing Vorak vessel. The ship contained a squad of Vorak soldiers led by General Krex, who was famous for his harsh treatment of species he considered inferior. General Krex believed that humans were naturally dishonest and primitive compared to the noble Vorak race. When the Vorak patrol ship arrived at New Sol, the soldiers immediately began scanning the planet for traces of their missing vessel. Their advanced sensors quickly detected the metal pieces that the 3 boys had found in the tunnel. General Krex was furious when he realized that humans had taken parts from a Vorak military ship. The alien soldiers landed near the human village, in their intimidating black uniforms and heavy weapons. They demanded to speak with whoever had stolen pieces from their crashed ship. The colonists were frightened by the angry aliens. but they tried to explain that 3 young boys had simply found the pieces and meant no harm by taking them. General Krex listened to the humans' explanations, but he did not believe them. In his mind, humans were thieves and liars who could not be trusted. He declared that the boys had committed crimes against the Galactic Federation by stealing military property and interfering with official Vorak business. The human colonists begged General Krex to show mercy and explained that Taiho Jinwoo and Hyunki were just children who had made an innocent mistake. They offered to return all the metal pieces immediately and pay any fine that the Federation required. The parents of the 3 boys fell to their knees and pleaded for their children's lives. But General Krex had already made his decision. He announced that human criminals must face military justice according to Federation law, and that no exceptions would be made. The Vorak soldiers began building 3 tall wooden posts in the center of the village, while the terrified colonists watched in horror. The peaceful morning that had begun with 3 friends playing in the sunshine was about to end with a tragedy that would change the entire galaxy forever. The wooden posts stood like dark shadows against the bright blue sky of New Seoul. General Krex and his Vorak soldiers had worked quickly to build what they called instruments of justice. The human colonists gathered around the village square, with tears in their eyes as they watched the aliens prepare for something terrible. Taiho Jinwoo and Hyunki stood between the alien soldiers with their hands tied behind their backs. The boys looked scared, but they tried to be brave for their families who were crying and calling out their names. The 3 friends looked at each other and tried to smile even though they knew something very bad was about to happen. General Krex announced in a loud voice that the human criminals would be executed for their crimes against the Galactic Federation. He said this punishment would serve as a warning to all humans about what happened when they stole from their alien superiors. The Vorak soldiers forced the 3 boys to stand beneath the wooden posts while they prepared the ropes. A human colonist named Minho secretly recorded everything on his communication device. He hid behind other villagers and made sure the camera captured every moment of what the alien soldiers were doing. Minho knew that people on other human worlds needed to see what was happening to innocent children on New Seoul. The boys' parents rushed forward and begged General Krex to spare their children. Taeho's mother fell to her knees and promised to give the aliens anything they wanted if they would just let the boys live. Jinwoo's father offered to take his son's place and die instead of the young boy. Hyunki's mother cried so hard she could barely speak as she pleaded for mercy. But General Krex showed no emotion as he ordered his soldiers to continue with the execution. He said that humans were too emotional, and this was exactly why they were inferior to other species in the galaxy. The Vorak commander believed that showing mercy to criminals would make other humans think they could break Federation laws without consequences. The ropes were placed around the necks of the 3 boys as their families screamed and tried to rush forward to save them. Other Vorak soldiers pointed their weapons at the colonists and warned them to stay back or face the same punishment. The entire village watched in horror as their children were murdered for the crime of finding metal pieces in an old tunnel. Within minutes, the 3 young lives were ended in front of their mothers and fathers. The boys who had been playing and laughing that same morning were now hanging lifeless from the wooden posts. General Krex announced that justice had been served according to Federation law, and that no further action would be taken against the colony. The Vorak soldiers left New Seoul that same day, confident that they had taught the humans an important lesson about respecting alien authority. They reported to Federation headquarters that the matter was closed, and that the human criminals had been properly punished. General Krex received praise from his superiors for maintaining order in the outer colonies, but the aliens had made a terrible mistake that would cost them everything they held dear. They had killed human children in front of their families, and they had no idea what kind of fury they had unleashed across the galaxy. Minho immediately transmitted his recording to every human world he could reach through the communication network. The video showed 3 terrified boys being murdered by alien soldiers for finding scrap metal in an abandoned tunnel. The footage spread like wildfire through human space as colonists shared it with friends and family on distant planets. On Earth, the video reached President Soo-jin within hours of the execution. She was eating dinner with her own children when the message arrived on her secure communication device. After watching the recording, President Soo-jin sat in silence for several minutes before calling an emergency meeting of the Human Defense Council. the underground command center on Earth filled with military leaders, scientists, and politicians who had seen the terrible video from New Seoul. Admiral Dong-Yun, head of the human space fleet, watched the footage with tears streaming down his face. He had grandchildren the same age as the murdered boys, and he could not stop thinking about how their families must be feeling. These were not the first humans killed by aliens since joining the Galactic Federation. Over the years, many human colonists had died from alien violence while the Federation did nothing to protect them. But something about seeing 3 innocent children executed in cold blood broke something deep inside every human who watched the video. Dr. Yuna, the chief military scientist, stood up during the emergency meeting and reminded everyone about Project Starfire. This was a secret weapons program that had been developing new military technology for decades. The project had been created in case humans ever needed to defend themselves against alien aggression, and that day had finally arrived. The Federation had always treated humans as second-class citizens who should be grateful for whatever scraps they were given. Human complaints about alien violence were ignored or dismissed as unimportant. When humans asked for protection, the Federation said they should control their own criminals better if they wanted to avoid future problems. Admiral Dong-Yun gave the order to activate all human military assets across the galaxy. Secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields received coded messages to begin working around the clock. Human colonies that had been preparing for this day started converting civilian ships into military vessels. Every human settlement began training militia forces and preparing defensive positions. The Federation's intelligence services noticed increased human activity, but dismissed it as unimportant. They thought humans were too weak and scattered to pose any real threat to the established galactic order. Most alien species believed humans would eventually accept their place as servants and laborers for their superior alien masters. Ambassador Yunji, humanity's representative to the Galactic Federation, formally requested an investigation into the deaths of the 3 boys. She demanded that General Krex and his soldiers face trial for murdering innocent children who had committed no real crime. She presented evidence that the boys had simply found abandoned metal pieces and had intended no harm. The Federation Council laughed at Ambassador Yunji's request and told her that humans should teach their children to respect alien property if they wanted to avoid future punishments. They said the Vorak soldiers had acted correctly according to Federation law and that no investigation was necessary. That night, Ambassador Yunji sent a final message to Earth containing just 3 words that would change galactic history forever. President Sujin read the message and gave the order that every human had been waiting for since the first colonist was killed by alien violence. The sleeping giant of humanity was about to wake up, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Deep in the cold darkness of the Kuiper Belt, massive doors opened for the first time in 20 years. The asteroid bases that had been carefully hidden from alien sensors began releasing ships that no enemy had ever seen before. These were not the small civilian vessels that aliens were used to seeing from human colonies. These were warships built in secret and designed to destroy any enemy that threatened human children. Captain Kangman stood on the bridge of the flagship Soul Fury as his crew prepared for the mission they had trained for their entire lives. The ship was enormous compared to normal human vessels, with weapons that combined human creativity with alien technology captured over decades of careful planning. Every bolt and wire had been designed with one purpose: to make alien enemies pay for every human life they had taken. The human fleet emerging from the hidden bases was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. While alien ships relied on energy shields and plasma weapons that looked impressive in space battles, humans had developed kinetic projectile systems that could punch through any known defense. Their ships were smaller and faster, designed to swarm larger alien vessels like angry insects attacking a giant. Intelligence Officer Ji-young had spent 15 years studying every alien military force in the Federation. She knew their tactics, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their overconfidence. After centuries of easy victories over primitive species, the aliens expected enemies to follow traditional space combat rules and announce their attacks with formal challenges. Humans had no intention of fighting fairly. The first target was obvious to everyone in the human military command. General Krex, who had ordered the execution of 3 innocent boys, lived on the Vorak homeworld called Vorak Prime. This heavily defended planet served as the military headquarters for one of the Federation's most powerful warrior races. It was exactly the kind of impossible target that would prove humans were no longer weak victims. The human fleet approached the Vorak system using stealth technology that they had been developing for decades. They moved slowly and carefully, using the natural radiation of space to hide their heat signatures from enemy sensors. The ships looked like small asteroids or pieces of space debris until they were close enough to strike without warning. Vorak Prime was protected by hundreds of heavy battle cruisers and orbital defense platforms that had never been defeated in combat. The Vorak military was famous throughout the galaxy for their skill in space warfare and their advanced technology. They considered themselves the finest warriors in the Federation and had never lost a major battle against any enemy. But the Vorak had always fought against other alien species who followed the same basic rules of engagement. They expected enemies to approach directly, challenge their fleet to honorable combat, and fight according to established military traditions. The concept of sneak attacks and surprise strikes was considered dishonorable by most alien cultures. Captain Kangman watched the enemy fleet through his ship's sensors and felt no emotion except cold determination. These aliens had murdered children and celebrated it as justice. They had laughed when human parents begged for mercy and treated the execution like entertainment. Now they would learn what happened when humans stopped asking for permission to defend themselves. The attack began at exactly midnight according to Vorak Prime Time. Human ships emerged from behind moons and asteroids, firing their kinetic weapons at maximum velocity. The projectiles were simple pieces of metal, accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic launchers, but they struck with the force of small nuclear explosions when they hit their targets. The Vorak shields, which were designed to deflect energy-based weapons, were completely useless against solid objects moving at near light speed. Alien ships began exploding before their crews could even identify what was attacking them. The famous Vorak military discipline collapsed as ship after ship was destroyed by an enemy they could not see or understand. Admiral Vorthak, commander of the Vorak defense fleet, tried to organize a counterattack, but his communication systems were being jammed by human electronic warfare. His sensors showed enemy contacts appearing and disappearing like ghosts, while his own ships continued to explode around him. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this coordinated surprise assault. Captain Kangman's voice echoed across all human communication channels as the battle raged around Vorak Prime. He dedicated every shot fired and every enemy ship destroyed to the memory of Taiho Jinwoo and Hyunki, who would never see another sunrise because of alien cruelty. The human crews fought with desperate fury, knowing they were avenging the deaths of innocent children. The Vorak tried to retreat to their orbital defense platforms, but found that humans had already infiltrated and sabotaged these supposedly impregnable fortresses. Explosions bloomed across the platforms as hidden charges destroyed weapon systems and life support facilities. Thousands of Vorak soldiers died without ever seeing the human infiltrators who had been living among them for months. Lieutenant Sunho led a team of human commandos who had been secretly placed on Vorak Prime years earlier. They had posed as maintenance workers and service personnel while gathering intelligence and placing explosives in critical military facilities. When the fleet attack began, they activated their sabotage devices and threw the planet's defenses into chaos. The battle lasted only 6 hours before the surviving Vorak ships began fleeing the system in complete disorder. The mighty defense fleet that had never known defeat was scattered and broken by an enemy they had dismissed as weak primitives. More than half of their ships were destroyed or damaged beyond repair, while the human fleet suffered only minor casualties. General Krex tried to escape in his personal command ship, but found his path blocked by Captain Kangman's flagship. The ID, Soul Fury, was smaller than the Vorak vessel, but its weapons quickly disabled the aliens' engines and left them helpless in space. Human Marines boarded the enemy ship and captured the general who had ordered the execution of 3 boys. As news of the victory spread through human space, celebrations broke out on every colony and settlement. For the first time since joining the Galactic Federation, humans had struck back against their alien oppressors and won a crushing victory. The 3 boys whose deaths had seemed meaningless were now being remembered as heroes who had awakened. humanity's true strength. But this was only the beginning of the war that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Donghyun had prepared a comprehensive battle plan that would strike at every alien species that had supported the oppression of humanity. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and its fury would burn across the stars until justice was finally achieved. The destruction of the Vorak home fleet sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, like ripples across a still pond. In one night, humans had eliminated the military force of one of the Federation's most powerful warrior races. But this victory was only the first move in a carefully planned war that would bring the entire galactic order crashing down. Strike teams led by Commander Taejun began attacking Federation military bases across 15 different star systems. These were not random raids, but precisely coordinated operations targeting the aliens who had supported or ignored the systematic oppression of humanity for decades. Each attack was swift, brutal, and left no survivors to warn other bases about human capabilities. The human commandos moved like shadows through enemy installations, using stolen alien uniforms and forged identification codes to penetrate supposedly secure facilities. They had spent years learning alien languages, studying enemy procedures, and memorizing the layouts of important military bases. When they struck, their attacks were devastating and complete. On the moon base of Centauri 7, Lieutenant Daeho led a team that destroyed the Federation's primary intelligence gathering station. The base had been monitoring human communications for years and reporting any signs of rebellion to Federation headquarters. Now the facility was a smoking crater, and its alien staff were scattered atoms drifting in space. The Federation Council met in emergency session as reports of human attacks poured in from across their territory. Council members who had laughed at human requests for justice now faced the reality that their military forces were being systematically destroyed by the species they had dismissed as weak primitives. Panic spread through the alien leadership as they realized how badly they had misjudged human capabilities. Senator Yuki, a feline-like alien who had always advocated for better treatment of humans, tried to propose immediate peace negotiations. She argued that the Federation had made a terrible mistake in allowing the execution of human children and should offer formal apologies along with compensation for the victims' families. Her words fell on deaf ears as the other council members were too proud to admit their errors. The reptilian delegate Sereth declared that showing any weakness to humans would encourage other minor species to rebel against Federation authority. He demanded that the full military might of all member species be assembled to crush the human uprising before it could spread further. His proposal received enthusiastic support from delegates who had profited from human slave labor for decades. Instead of seeking peace, the Federation decided to teach humanity a lesson that would be remembered for generations. They assembled the largest military fleet in galactic history, bringing together warships from 30 different alien species. The combined armada contained over 10,000 vessels, including massive dreadnoughts that had never been defeated in battle. The alien fleet was commanded by Supreme Admiral Korvax, a brilliant military strategist from the Crystalline Nexus Empire. He had studied the human victories and concluded that surprise attacks only worked against unprepared enemies. His plan was simple and direct: attack Earth itself and force humanity to surrender by threatening their homeworld with complete destruction. The Federation believed that humans would collapse once their birth planet was under threat. They expected desperate human leaders to beg for mercy and offer complete surrender in exchange for Earth's safety. The alien admirals had no idea that they were about to fly into the most carefully prepared trap in military history. On Earth, the entire population had been preparing for this moment since the first human colony was established. Every major city had been evacuated to massive underground bunkers built deep beneath the planet's surface. The bunkers contained enough supplies, food, and equipment to support billions of people for years if necessary. General Byung-hoon, commander of Earth's defenses, watched the approaching alien armada through the main display screen in his deep underground command center. The facility was located 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains and could survive direct hits from the most powerful alien weapons. His staff monitored thousands of hidden sensors throughout the solar system, tracking every enemy ship. The planet's surface appeared to be defended by only a few scattered military installations and orbital platforms. The aliens saw exactly what humans wanted them to see: a desperately weak defense that could be easily overwhelmed by their massive fleet. They had no idea that Earth itself had been converted into the largest fortress in galactic history. Dr. Yuna activated the quantum communication network that connected every human military unit across the galaxy. While alien species had to rely on slower-than-light communications during battle, humans could coordinate their forces instantly across vast distances. Every human ship, space station, and planetary defense system now operated as parts of a single, unified military force. The alien fleet entered the solar system in perfect formation, confident that they would end the human rebellion with one decisive battle. Their sensors detected the expected weak defenses around Earth, and the admirals congratulated themselves on the easy victory that lay ahead. They ordered their ships to accelerate toward the human home world at maximum speed. Hidden weapons platforms throughout the solar system remained silent and invisible as the enemy fleet passed by. Human stealth technology had advanced far beyond anything the aliens possessed, and their sensors could not detect the thousands of armed satellites and missile launchers waiting in ambush. The trap was set and ready to spring. Captain Minji commanded a squadron of human fighter craft hidden behind one of Jupiter's moons. Her pilots were volunteers who had requested the most dangerous missions available, knowing they would probably not survive the coming battle. Each pilot carried a photograph of Taeho Jinwoo and Yunki taped to their instrument panels as a reminder of why they were fighting. The alien fleet reached the orbit of Mars before the first human weapons opened fire. Suddenly, the empty space around them erupted with missile launches and energy beams as hidden platforms revealed themselves. The aliens found themselves caught in a crossfire that came from every direction at once with no safe path for retreat or advance. Admiral Korvax realized with growing horror that his fleet had sailed directly into a massive ambush. Human weapons platforms were emerging from hiding places throughout the solar system, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned space itself into a death trap. His carefully planned attack had become a desperate struggle for survival against an enemy that had anticipated his every move. The Battle of Sol had begun, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, as human fury finally found its full expression against the aliens who had murdered their children. The Battle of Sol raged across the human solar system like a storm of fire and metal that could be seen from distant star systems. The alien fleet that had entered with such confidence now found themselves trapped in a nightmare of coordinated human attacks coming from every direction. Space itself had become a weapon as hidden platforms and concealed ships emerged from behind planets, moons, and asteroids. Fleet Admiral He-jin commanded the human forces from her hidden base deep beneath the surface of Mars. She had studied every great military leader in human history, from ancient generals who defended their homelands to modern space tacticians who understood three-dimensional warfare. Her strategy was elegant in its simplicity: make the aliens pay such a terrible price for attacking Earth that no species would ever threaten humanity again. The alien ships were larger and more advanced, with shields and weapons that had dominated galactic warfare for centuries. But the humans had advantages that their enemies had never encountered before. Every human pilot was fighting for their families, their children, and the memory of 3 innocent boys who had been murdered for finding scrap metal. They flew their ships with desperate courage that no alien could understand or match. Captain Minji led her fighter squadron in a direct assault against the Federation flagship Eternal Dominion. Her tiny ships were no bigger than alien escape pods, but they moved with precision and coordination that confused the enemy gunners. The human pilots had trained together for years, learning to fight as a single unit that could overwhelm much larger opponents through teamwork and sacrifice. The alien flagship was protected by dozens of escort vessels and defensive platforms that should have made it impossible for small fighters to penetrate its defenses. But the human pilots used tactics that violated every rule of civilized space warfare. They rammed damaged ships into enemy vessels, used their own fighters as guided missiles, and continued attacking even when their ships were falling apart around them. Minji's ship took direct hits from 3 different enemy weapons, but she kept flying toward the Federation command center with her engines smoking and her life support systems failing. Her final transmission was heard by every human in the battle as her fighter crashed through the flagship's bridge window. "This is for Taiho, Jinwoo, and Hyunki," she said as her ship exploded. "Humanity remembers its children." The destruction of the Federation flagship threw the entire alien fleet into confusion as their command structure collapsed. Individual captains began making their own decisions without coordination from higher authority. Some tried to retreat, while others attempted to regroup for counterattacks. The disciplined formation that had entered the solar system dissolved into chaos as human weapons continued to tear through enemy ships. Supreme Admiral Korvax barely escaped the destruction of his command vessel by transferring to a smaller cruiser. He watched in disbelief as the fleet he had assembled from 30 different worlds was systematically destroyed by opponents he had dismissed as inferior. The humans fought with a fury and determination that went beyond normal military tactics into something that resembled religious fanaticism. The turning point of the battle came when Dr. Yuna activated Earth's ultimate defense system. Weapons platforms that had been hidden throughout the solar system for decades suddenly revealed themselves and began firing in perfect coordination. The platforms had been disguised as asteroid space debris and even natural satellites that enemy sensors had ignored completely. The coordinated barrage created a deadly crossfire pattern that covered every cubic meter of space around Earth. Alien ships found themselves unable to move in any direction without flying directly into devastating weapon fire. Their fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just hours earlier, began falling apart under the relentless human assault that came from every possible angle. Commander Sung-ho led a team of human marines who boarded crippled alien vessels to capture important prisoners and gather intelligence about Federation military capabilities. The boarding actions were brutal close combat fights in the corridors and compartments of enemy ships where human rage met alien desperation in deadly encounters. The aliens had never faced enemies who fought with such personal hatred and emotional intensity. Most galactic warfare was conducted according to established rules that limited civilian casualties and protected non-combatants. But humans viewed the Federation fleet as child killers who deserved no mercy or consideration for their lives. Lieutenant Youngman commanded a human destroyer that specialized in hunting damaged enemy vessels, trying to escape the battle. His ship was smaller and faster than most alien cruisers, and he used hit-and-run tactics to finish off opponents who were already wounded by other human units. Each enemy ship he destroyed was dedicated to the memory of the 3 boys whose deaths had started this war. On the Federation cruiser Star of Rigel, Captain Vorthak of the Centaurian Empire realized that his forces were facing complete annihilation. He had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy, but had never seen such fierce resistance from any species. These humans seemed to have no fear of death, and no willingness to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds. The alien captain tried to contact other Federation vessels to coordinate a fighting retreat, but found that human electronic warfare systems had jammed most of their communications. His ship was alone in a hostile solar system surrounded by enemies who wanted nothing more than to avenge their murdered children by destroying every alien they could reach. The battle continued for 18 hours as human forces slowly but steadily destroyed the massive alien fleet. Ships that had ruled the space lanes for centuries became floating debris as human weapons found their targets with deadly accuracy. The Federation armada that had been assembled to crush human resistance was being systematically annihilated by the very people it was meant to intimidate. As dawn broke over the Earth, the surviving alien ships began fleeing the solar system in complete disorder. Of the 10,000 vessels that had attacked humanity's homeworld, fewer than 3,000 managed to escape. The Federation had suffered the greatest military defeat in their history at the hands of a species they had dismissed as weak and primitive. President Sujin broadcast a message to every world in the galaxy as the last alien ships disappeared into hyperspace. Today, she said, humanity has proven that we will never again bow to those who would harm our children. The 3 boys who died on New Sol have been avenged, but their sacrifice has awakened something in the human spirit that will never sleep again. The galaxy would never be the same, because 3 friends who had dreamed of exploring the stars had instead become the spark that ignited humanity's rise to power among the civilizations of space. In the months following the Battle of Sol, The Galactic Federation began collapsing like a house built on sand during an earthquake. Species that had been oppressed for centuries watched humanity defeat the greatest fleet in galactic history and realized that the Federation could be challenged and beaten. Rebellions broke out across dozens of star systems as minor species demanded the same respect and protection that had been denied to them for generations. Emperor J1 of the newly formed human empire received delegations from alien species who had never spoken to humans as equals before. His palace on Earth was constantly busy with ambassadors from worlds seeking alliance and protection from Federation retaliation. The species that had once mocked humans as weak primitives now begged for treaties and trade agreements with the galaxy's newest superpower. The Altarian bird people, who had been enslaved by the Federation for 300 years, sent their most honored diplomat to request human assistance in liberating their home world. The aquatic Nereid species offered exclusive rights to their underwater cities in exchange for human naval protection. Even the proud Draconian Empire quietly approached human negotiators about possible cooperation agreements. Humanity had become the most feared military power in known space within less than a year. The three boys whose deaths had started this transformation were remembered as heroes who had awakened humanity's true potential. Statues of Taeho Jinwoo and Hyunki were erected on every human world, and their story was taught to children as an example of how sacrifice could change the galaxy. The Vorak Empire, which had executed the three boys, no longer existed as an independent power. Their home worlds had been conquered by human forces and converted into memorial colonies, where the story of New Sol was preserved for future generations. The entire Vorak military caste had been disbanded, and their warrior culture replaced with human concepts of justice and equality. General Krex, the alien commander, who had ordered the execution of 3 innocent children, was captured during the fall of Vorak Prime. He was brought to Earth in chains to face trial for crimes against humanity before a tribunal of judges from species that had suffered under Federation oppression. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy as a symbol of the new order replacing the old. During his trial, General Krex maintained that he had acted according to Federation law and military tradition. He claimed that humans were inferior beings, who needed to be controlled by their betters for the good of galactic civilization. His arrogance and lack of remorse shocked observers from species who had begun to question the moral foundations of the Federation system. The tribunal found General Krex guilty of multiple crimes, including the murder of children and the oppression of civilian populations. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on New Sol, where he would spend his remaining years maintaining the memorial garden planted on the spot where Taeho Jinwoo and Hyunki had been executed. Every day he would be reminded of the consequences of his actions and the children whose deaths had destroyed his empire. Ambassador Eunji, who had once begged the Federation Council for justice, now served as humanity's representative to the new Galactic Council. This time, when she spoke, every alien species listened with respect and fear. The galaxy had learned that humans were not weak or primitive, but a species capable of terrible vengeance when their families were threatened by outside forces. The new Galactic Council was based on principles of equality and mutual respect, rather than the domination system that had characterized Federation rule. Every species, regardless of size or technological development, had equal representation and voting rights. The council chambers were designed to accommodate different alien biologies and communication methods, ensuring that all voices could be heard. Admiral Dong-hyun established the Human Defense Force as the galaxy's new peacekeeping organization, with a mission that was simple but revolutionary. They would protect innocent beings from oppression and ensure that no species would ever again suffer the systematic abuse that humanity had endured under Federation rule. Human ships began patrolling space lanes that had once been controlled by alien tyrants and slave traders. The Human Defense Force operated under strict rules of engagement that prohibited attacks on civilian targets or non-combatants. Unlike the Federation military, which had used fear and brutality to maintain control, the human forces focused on protecting the weak and establishing justice for all species. Their reputation for fairness and strength attracted volunteers from dozens of different worlds. Captain Woo-sung commanded the patrol ship New Sol Memorial as it investigated reports of illegal slave trading in the Outer Rim territories. His Crew included humans and aliens working together as equals in a partnership that would have been impossible under the old Federation system. The ship carried advanced sensors and weapons, but its most important cargo was the message that oppression would no longer be tolerated. On the planet Kepler-7, the human patrol discovered a secret facility where reptilian slavers were holding thousands of captured aliens from primitive worlds. The slaves included children as young as 10 years old who had been torn from their families and sold to wealthy Federation remnants. Captain Wusung ordered his crew to free the slaves and arrest the slavers in an operation that became legendary throughout the galaxy. The liberation of Kepler-7 was broadcast across human space as an example of the new galactic order in action. The freed slaves were returned to their homeworlds with human escort ships ensuring their safety. The reptilian slavers faced trial and punishment while their facility was converted into a school where former slaves could learn skills to rebuild their lives. Dr. Yuna, who had developed the weapons that won the Battle of Sol, now focused her scientific genius on peaceful projects that would benefit all species in the galaxy. Her research stations developed new medical treatments, agricultural techniques, and communication technologies that were shared freely with any world that requested assistance. The woman who had helped destroy the Federation fleet became known as the architect of galactic cooperation. On New Sol, a magnificent memorial was built on the exact spot where 3 young boys had been murdered for the crime of curiosity. The memorial consisted of 3 silver towers reaching toward the stars with the names Taiho, Jinwu, and Hyunki, carved in letters that could be seen from orbit. Eternal flames burned at the base of each tower, representing the light of human determination that would never be extinguished. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different species made pilgrimages to New Sol to pay their respects to the 3 boys whose deaths had changed the galaxy forever. The memorial garden surrounding the towers contained plants and flowers from every world in human space, creating a living symbol of the diversity and beauty that could flourish under human protection. The inscription on the main memorial plaque was written in every known galactic language and read simply, Taiho, Jinwu, and Hyunki died as innocent children, but their sacrifice awakened the sleeping giant of human fury. They will be remembered as long as humanity reaches for the stars and fights for justice among the peoples of the galaxy. President Sujin often visited the memorial during her trips to the outer colonies. She would stand quietly before the silver towers and think about how 3 boys playing in tunnels had accidentally triggered the greatest transformation in galactic history. Their deaths had been meaningless in the eyes of their killers, but had become the foundation of a new age of freedom and equality. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten, written in the wreckage of Federation fleets and the ashes of oppressive governments. Humans might seem weak and emotional compared to other species, but when their children were threatened, they became the most dangerous force in the universe. The Federation had discovered too late that some sleeping giants should never be awakened. Years passed and the human empire grew stronger, while maintaining its commitment to protecting the innocent and punishing those who preyed upon the weak. New colonies were established on distant worlds while human ships patrolled the space lanes, keeping them safe for peaceful travelers and honest traders. In the quiet moments between the stars when human crews patrolled the darkness of space, they would remember 3 friends who had dreamed of exploring the galaxy, but had instead given their lives to ensure that future generations would inherit a universe where justice prevailed over oppression. The boys who had died alone and afraid on a distant world had become the guardians of galactic freedom, whose memory would inspire heroes for generations to come. The human empire continued to grow and prosper, but it never forgot the price of freedom, or the 3 boys whose innocent deaths had awakened the fury that transformed a galaxy of slaves into a community of free peoples, reaching together toward the infinite promise of the stars.